I sat down with Cowell recently, and you might be surprised by the man behind the reputation.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for doing this.
Thank you for being here.
How can I make you feel important in this interview?
You already have. You're sitting here. So I feel important.
I know it's one of your sayings that the first thing you try to do is convince the other person that you're going to make them feel important.
It's good that you mentioned that. It's something my dad taught me when I was very young. And I asked him a question once, you know, how he runs a company. And he said, it's very simple. He said, everybody has a sign on their head that says, make me feel important. And it's something I've always been very aware of, that when you make a show and you've got 150 people on it, every person on that show rightly has to feel that they're acknowledged for the part they play. If you start thinking it's all about you, you've got a big problem.
Well, about your father, two other things you've been quoted as saying. He was or was not the originator of "Don't leave the fair too late."
Well, he said an abbreviation of that. The most direct person who actually said that was when I met David Geffen. We went on his boat with some friends, and we were all dying to ask the same question. If you could give us one piece of advice, what would it be? And he said, it's very simple. Always know when to leave the fair. And that stuck with me.
And was it your father or Geffen or someone else who said, take yes for an answer and leave?
It was when someone says yes, shut up.
That's it.
Yeah, and I have lived my life like that, which is if I'm fortunate enough to sell something, once they've said yes, I'm out the room in 5 seconds. Because I've been in the reverse situation where I've said yes to somebody or some people, and after I said yes, they keep talking and talking and talking, and then I'm thinking, you know what, I wish I hadn't said yes now. So it's really good advice. Just get out the room as quickly as possible.
Well, you said you've lived your life that way. Have you always lived your life with this relentless honesty?
I think so, yeah. I mean, when I was young, Dan, I got into the music business via the mailroom. And you kind of hustle your way, you know, into the main part of the record company or the music publishing company, as it was in those days. And you try and work your way up. And the interesting thing is, it's a business where they invest millions and millions of dollars, but they give you no training. So, you know, when you screw up, and I did in the early days, I mean, I was told in no uncertain terms why I'd made a mistake, and I was taught tough love. And in return, I try and do the same thing back, because the worst thing you can do is, particularly when I do a talent show, if somebody comes in with absolutely no talent whatsoever and absolutely no chance of a career, I think it's a crime to say to these people, we'll take a couple of singing lessons and it will all work out, because it just doesn't work out that way.
Well, I think you'll agree that it's increasingly uncommon to find anyone who is steadily, so I use the word relentlessly, honest as you are. Now, question, do you use this only in your professional life or professional and personal life?
Probably less so in my private life. You know, like, you know, when your girlfriend comes into the room and she says, you know, do you like my outfit? All they want to hear is yes, and you actually go no, you're in big trouble. So I just go yes, regardless of how I feel.
Well, you and I would share that.
You know the feeling.
But when you're this honest and candid, even some would say brutal in your comments in professional life, there's a price to pay for that, isn't there?
A little bit. I think I've learned along the years that, you know, to do well in film, music, TV, particularly, you know, this business, it's not a popularity competition, and you know, it's a constant battle to win, and that's really all I care about. And whether I'm liked or not is sort of immaterial. I'd like to feel I'm respected, but liked is something completely different.
Well, what advice would you give, what counsel would you give, say, a young person, 12, 13, 14 years old, who sees you on television and says, boy, I like that honesty, I like that candor, that's the reason I like that guy. On the other hand, I want to be popular.
Be Paula. It's not really a problem. I think, you know, to do what I do, the only thing that bothers me is whether or not I'm relevant any longer. because I think if you're sitting on these shows, but you're not having hit records or hit artists in your real life, I think you look a bit of an idiot. So that's all I really care about, Dan, is that I can sit on one of these shows and justify why I'm there, because in my day job, I am creating hit artists. Otherwise, you're just a judge for hire, which I just couldn't do.
Were you ever a pleaser, or have you always been a harsh your buzz kind of guy?
Well, when I was at school, I was always in trouble for talking too much. And I got bored really quickly, and I kind of knew school wasn't for me, or college or anything like that. So I was impatient to start working. And interesting, when I was a very young kid, what I used to get a kick out of was making and earning my own money by washing cars, mowing lawns, or whatever it was. I used to love that. And then when I used to go to school and I was bored, I would get into a lot of trouble. So I don't think I've never really been a pleaser.
Well, you made it big by definition of that time of your life, and then you lost it by the time you were 30. Tell me about that. What did you learn from that?
Well, it was an interesting time because it was in the 1980s. I mean, the banks were really giving you a ton of money to spend. The stock market was going crazy. We all wanted Porsches. We all wanted nice houses. And we all believed the hype. And I was doing okay. But then it all came...
This is in the music business.
This is in the music business. I wasn't doing fantastic. I was doing okay. But I was living way beyond my means. I'd borrowed money to buy a Porsche, to buy a nice house and everything. And I was out every night. I was spending a fortune drinking and everything else. And then the whole thing came crashing down to a point where I think I owed the bank about $500,000. And I had the equivalent of maybe $5 in my pocket to get a cab home to my parents. That's how bad it was. But I went home. I did a deal to pay off the bank, which took me 3 years, but I paid off every penny. And it didn't bother me, interestingly enough. Once I got rid of everything, the Porsche, the house, I didn't want it. And I was now living a more honest life. And I just thought, you know what, I'm going to start again, but I'll never borrow money again.
Well, how humiliating was that, or was it, at age 30 to move back in with your parents?
Well, funny enough, it wasn't embarrassing at all. In a weird way, Dan, I think it was more embarrassing me driving around in a Porsche I couldn't own, or pretending I could own it, than actually getting rid of the whole lot, buying a car for $7,000, which I could afford and I liked. But I didn't lose a single friend, and no one was harsh to me or made me feel embarrassed. My parents actually loved me going back to live with them. But it was probably, in hindsight, the best thing that ever happened in my life, because it taught me, you know, how you can get things spectacularly wrong. But it took me about 3 years to get myself back on my feet. As I said, I paid off the loan to the bank.
So now you're 33, 34.
Yeah, about that, 33, 34. I was given a chance to build a label with one of the large labels. And then just slowly, bit by bit, I started to have more hits, more success. And it was probably round about that time when I understood the value of television in selling records. And I kind of was one of the first to, I think, understand that and start to build an area within that where I was successful. I thought I could sell the show as quickly in America. And I went to, I think, 5 or 6 networks and literally got thrown out of every single one. And then by luck, we sold the show to America, and that's how American Idol got on the air.
Were you surprised it took off so well, so quickly?
Yeah, I mean, I changed my mind again. I'd said yes to being on the American show, then I thought, you know what, I don't need this again. I mean, I had so much trouble in my life when Pop Idol came on the air.
In Britain?
Oh my God, it was like, is this worth it? You know, what the papers were saying, what people were saying. It was fun, but it wasn't that much fun.
It paid well.
It paid okay. Yeah. Got better as the years went on, Dan. We got a call to say that Fox had bought it. And I originally said yes, and I changed my mind. Then I changed my mind again, and I came over to film the show. And I was kind of thinking then, oh, this is going to be amazing. And then we'd rented this house, and the real estate agent said, I'm not sure about the show. And I said, why? He said, we've got a month's clause, break clause in the contract. And this is what the network had insisted on, so they didn't think it was going to be a hit. And then we shot the show, I went back to England, and then it came on air, and I got this call to say, the ratings were good, and, the rest was kind of history. I was coming off the #1 show, and now I had to launch a new show. And there was a lot of pressure. And the first week's ratings came in, they were okay. And then the second week, it just went crazy. And then from there on in, the show became a hit. And then for 2 or 3 years, we were doing well, Dan. But what we hadn't done is broken a worldwide artist. And I remember thinking, if we didn't find an artist this year who could break and be a legitimate artist, this all may be over. And a girl called Leona Lewis came on the show.
Having the success that X Factor had would be enough. Enough success, enough money, enough glory, enough recognition.
Well, it was an interesting story because trying to get that show made was a complete nightmare. Nobody wanted to take the show. And we managed to persuade a network in England to make a pilot. And it was unwatchable, this pilot. And just by accident or luck, someone from NBC in America called me, a guy called Craig, and said, I've heard you've got this show, what's it like? I said, it's fantastic. I've got 7 minutes to show you, because the rest was unwatchable. And Rare, he bought it in the room, and it did rate really, really well. And then I then sold it back to the UK, and then 3 days before I was due to start filming in the UK, the broadcaster literally pulled the plug on it and said, we're not going to make the show, it's not going to be a hit.
In Britain?
In Britain. I said, I have 150 people waiting to film this show. So they said, we'll give you 1 day on it, 24 hours. And if it doesn't work in 24 hours, we're going to pull it. And thanks a lot. So I had to go up, I couldn't tell anybody. And then I think within 5 minutes of filming, I sent a text back to this guy saying, it's a hit, don't worry about it. And it did become a hit.
Is this a case of each country has, I don't know, Morocco has talent?
Yeah.
Colombia has talent?
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly what they do. They replicate the English show, the American show. And just over the years, it's got bigger and bigger and bigger. So, yeah, it's an important show now.
From where does this creativity come?
Well, interestingly, I'd say most of what we do originated years ago back in America. Whether it was the Ed Sullivan Show, Live at the Apollo, Star Search. I used to love American talent shows. The Gong Show I loved. And I think The Gong Show was a huge inspiration for Got Talent, because I thought it was so funny. And I think without The Gong Show, we wouldn't have Got Talent. Or if there wasn't Star Search, there wouldn't be Got Talent. So, you guys started all these shows. We just adapted them a little bit.
Well, let's talk about the business. For a young person who's saying, I want to be that person. I want to be what you are today. What can they do? What should they be doing to give themselves a chance?
Well, it's a good question, Dan. I think that what you and I had when we first started is what I call an apprenticeship. And I think we were both fortunate probably to have mentors who, I certainly had 2 or 3 people in my life.
Had them. You
did as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I learned from them. And there was one guy when I was in my 20s, I used to follow around like a dog. And I used to sit in the studio and watch him work. He never paid me, but it was like a free education. So I was patient, and I kind of gave myself about a 20, 25-year window to kind of learn and achieve what I wanted to achieve. I think the difference today is that very few people are prepared to wait that long, because you have to learn to get good at these things. You're not born with a gift of making records or signing artists. It's through experience and learning and making mistakes. But I would say the getting there was more fun than being there.
Let's pursue this a little bit. Because if let's say you're about to get out of high school and you say to yourself, as you said to yourself, you know what, I don't think I'm college material. The fear sets in that, number one, if you don't go off to college, then the world's going to pass you by. That's first of all.
Yeah.
Secondly, it is, if something's going to happen, I got to make it happen quickly. I can't afford to spend 4, 5, 10 years in an apprenticeship.
Dad, I think it depends what you want in your life. What I realized very young is that I didn't want to live in fear. All my years in school, I did live in fear that if you got something wrong, they would beat you. I mean, literally. So you were kind of nervous. And I was always scared that I could have a job, which I may not be very good in, and my boss could hate me. And if he hated me, he could fire me. And I thought I couldn't live my life like that. So I kind of prepared myself to be good at something where I wouldn't have to have a boss, and then I would only have myself to answer to. And then I wouldn't live in fear any longer. And there are times in this job where you get nervous or you lose your nerve, but I don't wake up every morning like I did when I was going to school, or wake up on a Monday morning feeling sick because I've got to go to school. So I'm a great believer of, if you're not bright at school, and I wasn't clever at school, you can teach yourself something good, providing you have a good mentor and providing that you're patient.
How much of this came from your mother or your father? I mean, your father was a business person, was he not?
Yeah, my mum was a disciplinarian, and every time I got a bad report, she would say, "Your father's waiting for you in the study." And then I'd go into the study and he said, "Don't worry about it." He was like me. He knew I wasn't very smart, but he knew that, you know, I was always going to be a hard worker. And he was very, very understanding. And he honestly put no pressure on me at all. But my mum was, you know, very insistent that I got good grades and stuff like that, and I never did.
Well, your father didn't live to see your great success.
No, it was a real tragedy, that, Dan. I mean, I was doing pretty well, but it was just before things went really well. He was there when I got my first #1 record, which was a big achievement for me. And he was always there to give me advice. But on the day he died was the day I got news that a group I'd signed and really believed in had debuted at #1 with their record. And I'd obviously called to give him the news, and the news I got back, you know, was that he passed away. I mean, there was an awful irony to that.
Well, I want to come back to talking about business, but since your father's name has been raised, you're a father now for the first time.
Yeah. I mean, there have been surprises in my life, but that's #1. When I got that call, I got some news for you. It's like, whoa. But honestly, one of the best things, no, the best thing that's ever happened in my life.
How has it changed you?
I think it's made me a bit calmer. I think it balances your mind, that one minute you could be worrying about something really stupid that's happening on your shows, and then you've got somebody in front of you, you know, who is alive and they're part of you. It's a great leveler.
And you named your son after your father.
Yes, I did.
Did that decision come to you instantly and quickly?
No, interestingly, Lauren and myself came up with it. And funny enough, Lauren was more insistent than me because I wanted to call him Simon. And then one day I called her, I went, "Maybe it's not a great idea." She went, "Thank God you've said that because I've been worrying about this for the last 3 weeks.
So you considered having him being Simon?
100%. 100%.
Did you or did you not think that might place a very heavy load on him as he went through life?
Well, I did in the end. I think, you know, when he was old enough to go on Google and he would have typed in Simon Cowell, he may have had a few misgivings. So I didn't want to give him that pressure. Right. So Eric was a very, very good decision.
Let's talk about where the television business is, where the entertainment business is. First of all, 5, 10, 15 years from now, will we have television, in your opinion?
I think we will have TV in 15, 20 years' time. I think it's going to be still the most important thing. But, you know, what's interesting, I think if we had been talking even just a year ago, and you'd have asked me to say, you know, where do you think the future of TV is, and this was prior to House of Cards and Netflix, I would have given you a completely different answer. I think what's exciting after the success of House of Cards is that suddenly we have more buyers than we had 12 months ago, whether it's Yahoo, whether it's Netflix, Amazon, and this list is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. We're not so reliant upon the big networks as we used to be before. Creatively, when you look at the quality of something like House of Cards, I mean, just the direction, the writing, the cast, they're like movies. So I think TV's kind of gained back its credibility again. I actually hate going to the cinema. I went the other night. I mean, it was just the worst thing I've ever done.
But you're in the movie business now, big time.
I am, but I don't like going into movie theatres. We watched this movie the other day. I mean, I've got to tell you, watching 10 minutes of trailers in 3D with these stupid glasses, and everything looks identical, and then the film comes on. After 15 minutes, I had to walk out. I mean, it was like being assaulted. Maybe I'm just showing my age, but I love, you know, movies with a story, but all these crazy special effects at the moment, it was just too much, and I hate 3D movies.
Well, yes, but One Direction has been made into a movie, and now into a second movie, as I understand it.
Yeah, that was in 3D, actually. I like some 3D movies. Yeah, it was something I always wanted to do, Dan. I think if I was a kid and you just said what was my #1 thing I'd like to do, I would have said I'd love to produce a movie. Fascinating off the back of that was about 200 or 300 what I called superfans who'd supported them all the way through the competition, made it their job to promote this band around the world, because I signed them to our record label even though they didn't win. And then I saw something I'd never seen before in 30 years in the music business, which is fans, not a record label, marketing and promoting a band worldwide. To the point when we released their first album, and they'd only been to 3 countries, they went to #1 in 43 countries simultaneously. And I still, to this day, owe and credit everything to this 200 or 300 group of fans who just did the most phenomenal job I've ever seen. And that's now the age of promoting bands with what we have on the internet. That's when the internet is so powerful, it can do your job for you.
Internet is so powerful it can do your job for you, but it can also destroy you in an instant, can it?
100%. 100%. Trust me, Dan, I think about that on a daily basis. There's nowhere to hide.
But what does that do to the music business? What does it do to the television business? What does it do to the entertainment business, this new internet reality that you just described?
For us, and for me, I think it's the best thing that's ever happened. I can remember trying to promote a band in America 15 years ago. It would take a minimum of 6 to 9 months to get a small amount of awareness on a group. You would have to go to radio station to radio station. You'd have to do really horrible little clubs, gigs, anything to get known. And you could do 9 months and get absolutely nowhere at the end of it. Today, you can have a song, have a video, it can go viral. I mean, Susan Boyle was a good example, who was on Britain's Got Talent. I watched this thing in 24 hours go to 50 million hits. Within a month, 100 million, and now it's over 1 billion hits on YouTube. So the internet made this girl a global star within days, and that's when it can work for you. Without YouTube, Susan Boyle never could have been a hit outside of England. It would have been impossible.
Well, where is this going? Where is it headed?
Well, I think that as long as you are, I mean, as quite rightly said, that it can hurt you as well as it can do great things for you. You've got to be careful. I mean, when our shows are transmitted, when X Factor UK goes out on your channel here, you know, people are going to be watching this minutely, expressing their opinions on Twitter, Facebook, and everywhere else. And it's a whole different ballgame. I personally, I love it. I love watching our shows back when they go out live, and I have my computer on at the same time. I'm watching the social stuff on Twitter or wherever else as I'm watching the show, and both are equally entertaining. So I think the fact that the viewers have such strong opinions now, it's almost as much fun as watching the show. As a producer, I mean, it's intoxicating. It's so exciting, you know, having that ability to actually have that instant feedback as to how people are reacting to your show or not.
I can understand it being exhilarating, but it also can be depressing if you see yourself going down the tubes all of a sudden.
I've seen it go the other way, trust me, which is this show is a complete dog if I'm looking at the reaction now, and they were right.
Ride with me for a moment. I was posted to Great Britain as a news correspondent in the 60s.
Were we nice to you?
Very nice, I'm happy to say. When I was there, an older, more experienced correspondent said to me, he said, Dan, I have this piece of advice for you. Because they speak the same language, sometimes we Americans forget that it is a different country. And that has echoed with me. You have made the transition. You brought programs that have been very successful in the United Kingdom to our country sort of seamlessly. And I'm interested to know whether that's still true.
You know, I was told exactly the same thing back in reverse about Americans.
Right.
I heard that before I came to America, Dan. But once I came to America, and maybe I was naive, but I realized that we had a very similar sense of humor. We all react to a strong emotion in the same way. If we hate someone or love somebody or feel compassionate about somebody, we have very, very similar emotions. I think the difference was when I first came here was I think you are more polite in America than we are in the UK. So, you know, the very first time I was, you know, recording American Idol and told someone they were useless, Paula, who was sitting next to me, was like, "You can't say that." It's like, well, I can. And she was shocked. And I think the audience were a bit shocked. But then I think they started to understand that, you know, that's the whole point of the show, is to try and be honest and not, you know, lie to people, I guess.
Well, I'm going to turn that on his head. I've always thought that people in Great Britain and the United Kingdom, if anything, are a little more polite than we are in this country. True, they may speak more bluntly, and I'm not here to blow smoke at you, but anybody who knows you, whatever your flaws are, you are a very uncommonly polite person, particularly for someone who's in, I'll go ahead and say it, in the entertainment field. How and why did that come about?
Well, thank you. My mum taught me, she had an expression as a kid which she said to us, "Manners maketh the man." And I suppose going back to what my dad said as well about acknowledging people around you, I do have that ability that if I walk in a room, I'm aware of everybody, and it's important that they feel part of what we do and appreciate it. And by the way, if you don't like people, you can't do this job. It's as simple as that.
Well, tell me about that.
Well, I think that, you know, when you're sitting as a judge judging these shows, I mean, this is one of the issues I have at the moment when you put too many singers on a judging panel. Singers don't want to find other stars. It's just not in their DNA. They only think about themselves. That is the nature of being a solo artist. I am a cold-hearted A&R guy. I own a record label, so the only thing I'm interested in is finding a star. You put a singer in my seat and somebody 10 years younger than her comes on and is better than her, she does not want her to do well. It's a fact. That's why it's kind of crazy what's going on at the moment, that you've got singers judging other singers. It doesn't work.
Was that your problem with Paula?
100%. God, she'll kill me for that. Paula was the exception to the rule. She was better than others, let's put it this way. I do watch other shows sometimes, and I'm thinking, you're not sitting there thinking, I want to hear you. You're sitting there thinking, I actually want to promote my next record now. And it's so obvious and visible, Dan. And it just goes against the way you find stars. We never hire artists from my record label to find other artists because they can't do it and they won't do it.
Yeah. Well, having complimented you about your manners, and I love what your mother said, "Manners maketh the man." What a nice saying. You know what's said about you on the negative side, so let's start with a few things. Say to me, "Dan, what you don't know about Simon is he's really greedy." Not the first time you've heard that.
Greedy. I'm not greedy. I'll tell you what it is. Because you said to me a while ago, I must have made a lot of money when I first did Pop Idol or American Idol. I mean, the truth was I got paid nothing on the first series of Pop Idol, and I got paid not much more than nothing on the first show of American Idol. Once the show became successful, my feeling was, if you're making a lot of money, then so should I. I mean, it's just fair. You can't have it all. Right. If I'm having a part of this, the bill. I don't like meanness. No. But I've always been very strong about being paid what I believe I'm owed.
What do you consider to be your biggest weakness or vulnerability?
My biggest weakness is probably being led by your heart, not your head. There are things I've done, artists I've signed, shows I've made, where my heart at that time, as I said, was definitely the more dominant. And then your head kicks in a few weeks later and goes, what the hell have you done? But at that point, I am pretty good at holding my hands up and saying, that was my responsibility, that was my mistake. But it happens.
And what you consider to be your best strength?
I would say my best strength is that I'm a good listener. I like to have a lot of people in the room. I like to hear their opinions. I understand that people outside of my company could have better ideas than us, and we have to be aware of that.
From where does that come, this determination to listen and to be a good listener? It's not all that common a trait, particularly these days.
I like every day to learn something new, and I'm curious. And I think that when you hire young people, they have much more knowledge of what is happening in the world today than I do, because they are on their phones, they are on the internet all day long, they're on way more different channels on the internet than I am, so they actually know more that's going on than I do. So it's their job to tell me, rather than the other way around. That's why we pay them.
Professionally, best day of your life?
I would say, Dan, it was the second week's ratings of X Factor, when it cemented itself enough for me to know it was going to be a hit.
This is after you'd had success on Idol, but Idol wasn't your program. X Factor is your program. You had a tough time selling it. You sell it, you get a one-time shot, what the poker players would call a one-card cut. And by the second week, you knew that your new baby was going to take off.
You said it better than me. It's exactly what it was. And there was a lot of knives out there that second week. And I could feel them about to go into my skin. And it was a real moment of relief, Dan, when that happened. Because if it had gone the other way, it wouldn't have been great. And, you know, the truth is, particularly in Hollywood, you do something wrong, you are toast. People do not want to touch you. They're superstitious. If you fail at something, as far as they're concerned, you failed for life.
You've become typhoid, Simon.
And by the way, I get it. When we do something wrong, I say to my company, just be clear, no one's going to want to talk to us for 6 months.
Right.
So don't worry about it. Don't take it personally. Just use this time, come back with another hit. You have another hit, everything's reversed.
I asked you about professional life. In your personal life, what's been the worst moment of your personal life?
Worst day of my life, Dan, was the day my dad passed away. It was, without question, something I'd never expected or experienced. So when it happened, I mean, I can recall every moment of that day. It was horrendous. Nothing's come close.
What did you learn from that you carry with you now? And how has that affected your life as you've gone forward?
What I took from it, Dan, was in relation to my mum, is that every day I spent with my dad meant something. Every day I didn't spend with him meant something. And therefore, every day where I can have some interaction with my mum or my family is going to count for something when it's all over. And I was lucky that I was able to say that the only good thing about was that we'd had a fantastic relationship, you know, and to the day he died.
What are the chances now that you're a new father? Your son is not even a year old now. Have you thought about something along the lines, how can I be as good a father to my son as my father was to me? Or is the world turning too fast for you to think that way?
Well, it's an interesting question, and I've thought about it a lot. I mean, the times are so different. I guess what I don't want him doing is being on an iPad for too long during the day. I would encourage him to play football, swim, be outdoors. as much as possible, and learn how to talk, because, you know, the more people text and the more people start to abbreviate these text messages, it's going to be very difficult for people to communicate as you and I are able to communicate now in the future, because if you lose the ability to learn how to communicate with people, even telephone calls are rare now.
If your life is like mine, a lot of people don't even want a telephone call anymore.
They don't want to talk
They
to
avoid
you.
it. They want to text or they want to email.
100%, and I avoid emails as much as possible. I'm not crazy about telephone calls. I like face-to-face communication with people. And so that's, going back to my son, that's what I would, try and teach him, which is how important it is to be face-to-face with people, try not to text too much, and be kind to animals.
Well, as you've gone through life, have you ever been what you consider to be too heavily into drink?
Of course. I have a rule, which is never drink in the daytime and never drink before you eat it, and when you're having dinner. A couple of vodkas at night time. No, I once said it would be fun to do a live show drunk, and I nearly got everyone to do it.
You haven't had the guts to do that?
I think I will one day. It's just something. I think I was watching a Dean Martin talk show years ago, and he was definitely sloshed, and it was one of the funniest interviews I've ever seen. And those were the days where you could go on a talk show and have a few whiskeys and a cigarette. And I thought I would have loved to have been around those days.
Well, if you decide to do it, please call me collect before 6. We'd like to tape it. We'd like to tape it.
I'll let you know.
Who out there now has it? Who do you see or hear, you say to yourself, he or she has it? Whatever the X factor is, they have it.
Without question, Beyonce. Because she has, more than any other artist I've ever met in my life, total, utter steel in her eyes. She's what I call, and I mean this as a compliment, a killer. She is so aware of herself, the business, her star power, what it takes, the hours she puts in. She was like Michael Jackson when Michael Jackson was on the top of his game, and he was asked what are the 3 important things to be a star, and he said rehearse, rehearse, rehearse. And when Michael was on the top of his game, he had that, and she has that. You can just tell that she is, like I said, she's a killer.
Stands alone.
At the moment, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Simon, what's ahead for you? You've accomplished so much.
I always say hits pay the bills. I mean, it's as simple as that. Some will pay more, you know, some will pay less, but at the end of the day, you can't survive without being #1 or being close to #1. And you got to have hits, whether you're making movies, TV shows, music. That's all I ever say to my staff. Don't tell me a record going in at number 12 is better than a record going in at #1. If you're #1 in the ratings, #1 in the box office, you're doing great, and that's all we ever aspire to be. And like I said to you early on, for me personally, is to be relevant. I never want to be sitting in this chair talking to someone like you or judging a show where I really don't know what I'm talking about, because that's the point. You've got to stop doing what you're doing.
I haven't asked you this question. I waited to the end. Who are you? I mean, who are you really?
Happy and lucky. I would put it like that. I say happy and lucky because luck plays a part. Obviously, skill plays a part. But I'm fortunate enough to say, I was asked a question the other night over dinner, and we were playing this game. If you met the 16-year-old self, and you were able to go back in time and you met that person at 16, what would you say to that person? And I would have said, it's all going to work out fine. Because genuinely, I didn't think it was.
Which is hard to believe when you're 16.
100%. So, you know, I wouldn't have changed anything. You know, it's been a blast. And I'm lucky that I can, you know, wake up on a Monday morning without that pit in my stomach and actually look forward to what I do.
Tell me something about yourself that I don't know and the public doesn't know.
I like people. I really, really do. I mean, it doesn't always come over that way, but...
Okay. Behind the mask, do you really like people?
Yeah, I really do. What I don't get are people who are on TV or making records or making movies who bleat about the paparazzi or going out in public, etc., etc., I always say, well, then do a different job. You know, if you put yourself in that position and people are buying your records, watching your shows, the least you could do is shake their hands when they come up to you. I mean, who cares? Because one day they won't.
Well, is there anything that you came into this interview saying, listen, I'm going to talk to Dan, but if it's just one thing I want the audience to come away from this interview thinking and knowing about me, what would it be?
Honestly, I think you covered it. I'd like you to meet my dogs.
I'd love to meet your dog.
Can we get Squiddly and Diddly? Because although I've got one proper baby, these are my two other babies. Here they are. Here's Squiddly and Diddly. Come on, guys. Hello. Say hello. These are my two other babies.
And how old are they?
They're about a year old now. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, have you trained them yourself? You don't have time to train the dogs.
Dan, I've tried. They are untrainable. I mean, literally.
No.
Or maybe it's just me.
Yeah. Simon, thank you.
Dan, it's been an absolute pleasure.